Ainsley, Brian, and Steve, I'm back on the border, and let me tell you, it is just as intense, if not more, than I've ever seen it since I've been coming down here. We've just found out today that there have been 5 criminals arrested in this Rio Grande Valley. 3 are gang members, 2 of which are the MS-13 identified as, 2 sex offenders, 1 for sex acts with a minor. But when A.J. Hall and I left the airport, within just an hour of leaving the airport, driving down to take a look at the border, we got into the many arrests that were going on. Take a look. Not an hour since we've been landed. We came down to the border to see what's going on. You can see already the military helicopter up there, National Guard Air supporting Border Patrol, has just made this apprehension. We're looking through the slats. This is a temporary wall that stops the illegals just about a quarter mile, half a mile to the direction you're looking. This fence stops them from coming into McAllen. This is just indicative of what's showing up hour after day, hour after hour, day after day. It just keeps coming and overwhelming. You can see the manpower that it takes, obviously the eyes in the sky helping on this apprehension. Guys, behind me is the McAllen port of entry into Reynosa, Mexico. In the RGV sector here, they average 1,000 plus a day for about the last 10 days or more. 2 days ago, they had 1,400. We'll get to last night's numbers here early this morning. But the problem here is what to do with these people. The facilities can only hold about 3,300 illegal migrants that have been taken into custody. They have more than 6,000 right now. So if you pull agents off this border in the areas where it's really vulnerable and have them process these family units, which are surging, and you clear out 1,000, let's say, by releasing them into the public, another 1,000 are coming tonight. And speaking of releasing to the public, they're taking it to the Catholic Charities of RGV, to Sister Norma Pimentel. She says she's never seen anything like this. Listen.
Those numbers have been so different and so high in comparison to any other year before that it's unbelievable, the number of individual families that have been released in such great numbers.
And as you mentioned, Brian, Secretary Nielsen now coming down just west of us to El Paso. There, they're seeing a surge of nearly 1,700% in family unit apprehensions. I've been in contact early this morning with some of the agents out on the line. They say they've been very busy tonight. Guys?
Hey, Griff, I got a question for you. During your live shot, I saw a number of trucks go through there. You know, the president has threatened Mexico that unless they stop people, he's going to shut down the border. Now, apparently, they're talking about a plan B where they would shut down the border to everything except commercial trucks. How many people would that impact there in McAllen, Texas?
Well, it would be tremendous, Steve, because trucking is a major issue here. We had a trucker come down here about an hour ago and asked us, because we're a news crew, whether or not trucks were still allowed to come through. They had heard a rumor that the one in Laredo west of us was not open to trucks, but the trucking industry is tremendous here in Texas. It is to the tune of $187 billion of goods moved by trucks here in this area, and the local papers are talking a lot about that because they're concerned, rightfully so, that the president will be forced to close the border if Mexico doesn't do more to stop the surge that we're seeing down here right now.
So, Griff, we know there was like 70,000 plus last month in February apprehended. We know it's going to be over 100,000 in March apprehended. Does that include people that we miss? Is there a calculus on average how many we don't get?
We have no idea, but you talk to the BP officers here, they say there's got to be even more than ever because of the processing. Remember, Brian, Ainsley, and Steve, what people have to realize is that a decade ago when we had these similar numbers, they were mostly from Mexico, and they were sent back the same day because you just send them back right across this border. Now they are from Central America. They are women, children, family units. They have to be put somewhere. They have to be dealt with. And so the only way to do that is to pull officers off the border security mission and put them into processing. And so everyone that they arrest tonight, well, the day shift today, they're going to have to deal with processing those people and not sitting on that border. So the long answer is we really have no idea how many are coming across that aren't being caught, but we know there are a lot. Sister Pimentel, by the way, says in the last couple of weeks, she's got at least 10,000 or more that have been released to her little tiny Catholic charities here. And that's just one snapshot of what's happening on this 2,000-mile long border.
All right. Thank you, Griff. Thanks for your report. The president said it would have a negative impact if he had to shut down the border. I mean, we're hearing stories about all the avocados that our country depends on that come from Mexico. He said it would have a negative impact, but our security is more important. And he has a message for Congress. He said they could fix this in 45 minutes. He said they need to get rid of chain migration, catch and release, visa lottery, and do something about asylum and get rid of some of the judges.
So start drawing something up. Right now, if you're a minority in the House or you're a majority in the Senate, draw up exactly what you want, because I think Democrats are beginning to realize that this is not a man-made crisis. This is not Trump responsible for this problem. The wall is separate. Draw something up that'll change this thing in a half hour and start debating it and put people on the record on whether they see it's a problem. Because there are some Democrats like Beto O'Rourke who say things that just make no sense, like illegal immigrants make us stronger.
Well, Nancy Pelosi wants to put everybody on the record because apparently she had a meeting last night in the Speaker's chambers where they are considering putting up for a vote, every member of the House, a resolution that would condemn the president's call to shut the border. Of course, it would be symbolic. They're essentially daring the Republicans to oppose the president's signature issue. It would reaffirm Trump's immigration policies are not in the economic interest of the United States. That's what they're trying to say. So they're trying to say, okay, you Republicans and you Democrats, let's vote. Who's for shutting the border? Every Democrat's going to vote no. How many Republicans, though? They're trying to put Republicans on the official record to figure out whether or not they do.
They're condemning the president for doing this, but he's not the first president to do this. If you look back in 1963, Lyndon B. Johnson did that after JFK was assassinated. Richard Nixon did it in 1969, Operation Intercept. Ronald Reagan did it with Operation Camarina in 1985. And then George Bush, he did it after 9/11 in 2001.
And by the way, this is what they say. The auto industry would basically be grinded to a halt in about 2 weeks. $1.7 billion of services flow back and forth daily, and for the most part, a shutdown could lead, a prolonged shutdown between the two countries could lead to a recession in Mexico and the U.S., but you could do it on a smaller basis. You mentioned freight and walking lanes. The other thing is, what the president's saying is, I will do whatever it takes to secure the country, even if it hurts us economically, because my first job is security. That's called leadership, and if Republicans don't vote with it, I get that too, but the president's got a different responsibility.
He's got a big stick. This is what he's doing. He's negotiating with Mexico. He's saying, look, unless you do something about the problem at our southern border, I'm going to do that. Meanwhile, Julian Castro, who is running for president, what he would like to see is he would like the federal government to remove Section 1325, which makes illegal entry into the United States a federal misdemeanor and has ever since 1929. In other words, he wants to decriminalize breaking the law and breaking into the country.
I'm not buying into the BS that basically says that little children and mothers who are desperate and fleeing desperate circumstances are a national security threat to our nation. I said that we should decriminalize people who are coming here, crossing the border.
Well, he says that the law has been weaponized simply to target immigrants, and of course he's running for president and would like to decriminalize those crossings.
His blog post says the truth is immigrants seeking refuge in our country aren't a threat to national security. Migration shouldn't be a criminal justice issue.
And my question to you is, what's more important, social programs for Americans, public schools for Americans, or illegals who come here and need English as a second language, need to be given public school, need to be given tutoring help, maybe have social programs to prop them up? I'm sure they're fine people, but just ask yourself, what is more important, should be a priority? The American people and children in overcrowded classrooms already, who if they've written checks in Texas for $2.4 billion of Texas taxpayer dollars to help out the border in 3 years, $800 million to schools, and they're overburdened because of the illegal immigrants who should be allowed to come into our country.
And Lindsey Graham was talking about, he said, I've talked to these guys on the border. We've all talked to these people on the border. They say they need more manpower, and they are for a border wall. It's easy for us to sit here in New York. We're far away from the border, but we have gone down down there. The president's going down there for his 6th time this week. They're talking to the agents and finding out what they need to make sure they're safe.
And they have done the surge, Ainsley. They've already moved 545 blue uniformed CBP officers to help with asylum claims with these Central Americans.
Exactly, but here's the thing. If you want to find out what's really happening, talk to someone who's actually living through this and has gone through this. Casey Diaz is a former gang member, and he was on with Laura Ingraham last night, had some pretty powerful things to say. Listen to this.
It's a real, actual problem that we're having, and it can't be overlooked. I'm like 100% with the president and the choices that he's making to secure that border if need to lock it down. We see that people, with good hearts want to come in here and pursue a dream. But in these caravans, I can tell you from being in meetings in the past, when I was active in gang leadership, that there was plans, there was an agenda. And in these caravans, you're going to see a lot of MS-13, a lot of 18th Street. You're going to see a lot of gangs. They're going to try to get in here. That's just the bottom line.
By the way, it's not just the border cities, Ainsley. They dump these illegals in areas, and President Obama did it with those unaccompanied minors, in working class areas without telling mayors or governors. Next thing you know, you're sitting there and your kids come home from school and there's 10 extra kids in the school and they don't speak English. So that's what happens. They fan out across the country.
And all of these things that we're talking about this morning require them to change the law. And to the earlier point, will Congress do something? Before an election year, don't hold your breath. All right.
Okay, let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some headlines for us. Hi, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning to you at home as well. Let's begin with this Fox News alert now. And pilots flying the doomed Ethiopian Airlines plane followed Boeing's emergency protocol moments before the crash. The Wall Street Journal reporting the pilots turned off the flight control system that was automatically pushing the plane towards the ground before it crashed, killing 157 people. It was the second deadly incident involving 737 MAX jets. They're now grounded in several countries around the world. History made in Chicago overnight, the city electing its first black, female, and openly gay mayor. Political newcomer and former federal prosecutor Lori Lightfoot ran a campaign on shutting down government corruption.
Out there tonight, a lot of little girls and boys are watching. They're watching us. They're seeing a city reborn. A city where it doesn't matter what color you are, where it doesn't matter who you love, just as long as you love.
Lightfoot defeating Chicago establishment candidate Tony Preckwinkle. Rahm Emanuel decided against running for a third term. Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman will appear in a Boston courtroom today. The actresses are among dozens facing charges in the massive college admissions scandal. They could also face IRS penalties if they wrote the bribes off on their taxes. Prosecutors say the parents paid off schools and test prep services. Loughlin and Huffman could face up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Send it back to you. And
what line on your 1040 do you put the bribes that you paid?
I'm not really sure.
I'm not sure.
It put to his foundation, I guess. The thing is, too, they were mentioned at the Nick Awards for Kids last night. Meanwhile, 13 minutes after the hour, President Trump vows Republicans will run on a new health care plan, kinda.
So we're going to give a great health care plan. It's going to be much less expensive than Obamacare and much more usable.
So what will it look like when it's released in 2020? Our next guest knows. We're going inside that plan to make America's health care better.
We're going to give a great health care plan, and we're going to go and campaign on that plan. It's going to be much less expensive than Obamacare and much more usable in terms of deductibles.
You got President Trump last night promising a Republican audience a new health care package, but you're going to have to wait until after the 2020 election to deliver it. They're going to make it a campaign. Today, we continue our week-long look at what needs to be done to fix the healthcare system. The White House is reportedly working with 3 conservative think tanks, including the Heritage Foundation, on that. Here for that, day 3 of our series is Tim Chapman. He's the executive director of Heritage Action, which is a sister organization to the Heritage Foundation. Tim, good morning to you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay, your idea, the healthcare choices proposal, how does that go?
So there's a regulatory infrastructure right now that Obamacare put in place. It's driving costs up massively. We want to roll that back, and we want to allow states to have more flexibility to innovate and drive costs down.
Okay, what does that mean?
Basically, it means that right now the federal government has a one-size-fits-all program, okay? And we want states like Texas to be able to do what Texas thinks is right, and New York to do what New York thinks is right. And we want those states to compete on a level playing field. And we think when you do that, Texas costs will probably go down because there's conservatives there who know how to do competition. New York might have to have a different story, but this is the environment we want.
I get the benefit for what you're talking about, but the Democrats are, many of them, running on Medicare for all, which sounds great because if you don't have it, it's for everybody. Really, it's single payer, but people don't understand that. They hear Medicare for all, and I kind of like that. It seems easier than your plan.
Right, but then you tell them the second thing, which is that when you do Medicare for all, taxes are going to go up on American families, and you're going to lose choices. Right? Yeah. So no one's going to say that, right? No one's going to say that. Medicare polls well, but when you realize that if you do Medicare for all, everyone's going to pay a significantly higher tax burden, and then you also realize that not only are you doing that, but families are going to have less choices. You only get one choice. Right. And that's the issue.
Plus, there are a lot of variables. You don't know whether or not doctors and nurses are going to say, okay, I'm going to work for like 40% less, which I would have to under Medicare.
Yeah, that's the problem. And so we think that actually the Democrats are making a pretty profound mistake here by making Medicare for all their centerpiece. And so what you're seeing in the Democratic Party, and you're going to see in the primary, is that the candidates in the primaries are going to kind of trip over themselves to go as far left as they possibly can on this particular issue.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's the dynamic that's going to be at play. And so for us, it's really important that we are talking about this issue in terms of what we care about. I mean, our mistake as Republicans was that we didn't talk about this a lot in 2016, which is why we failed in 2017. There was no mandate on that issue in terms of what to do going forward. The president's leading us into a mandate here.
Well, let's see what happens. Tim Chapman from Heritage Action. Sir, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, meanwhile, 6:20 here in New York. Thought the love affair between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page couldn't get any worse. The FBI lovebirds. Well, wait until you hear what we just found out. It's something.
Good morning to you. Welcome back. Some quick headlines out of Washington now. Disgraced FBI agent Peter Strzok's love affair with lawyer Lisa Page made him vulnerable to foreign intelligence. That's according to Strzok's former boss, Bill Priestap, in newly released congressional testimony. Priestap did not try to split them up, however, saying, quote, "I'm not the morality police." Anti-Trump text messages between the lovers eventually got Strzok fired. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants leaker Chelsea Manning out of jail. She tweeted in part, quote, "Solitary confinement is torture. Chelsea is being tortured for whistleblowing. She should be released." The former Army intelligence analyst is behind bars after refusing grand jury testimony. Ainsley?
Hey. Thank you, Jillian. His progressive agenda includes amnesty for illegals and the Green New Deal. But despite limited experience, the media is singing praises for this Democratic hopeful. His name is Pete Buttigieg.
He is disarmingly charming. He's got this like almost like an innocence about him, but at the same time, he is an intellectual.
Everyone that interacts with him is just blown away by him. He's on fire.
There's no dirt on this guy, like nothing. Usually candidates have some skeletons somewhere, but even his skeletons are singing his praises.
But will all the hype translate to actual votes? Here to debate this is former Democratic State Senator Capri Cafaro and former National Justice Director for the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign, Teslin Figaro. Ladies, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, is he the future of the party? Capri, I'll start with you.
Well, I certainly think that he is part of that story for the future of the Democratic Party. I was one that was a Mayor Pete fan all the way back in 2016 when he ran for chairman of the Democratic National Committee, because I do think that he has a knack of being able to focus on the kitchen table issues while balancing that with a message of embracing, diversity and inclusiveness. I also think that, as someone who is outside the Beltway, who is an outsider, who is also a veteran, who is a problem solver, as someone who serves at the local level, and of course, as a fellow Midwesterner, I think that he brings some really unique things to the table. I appreciate that he's a Rhodes Scholar as well. And the fact that, he raised $7 million is basically an unknown, shows that he is someone that is making a mark, whether he actually gets the nomination or not. I think that he is certainly registering in the national landscape for the Democratic Party.
Teslin, what do you think? Is he just popular for the moment? Is it move over Beto? He's here to stay?
Well, I don't know. Obviously in 2016, I supported Senator Bernie Sanders. So, people doubted him in the beginning, and he obviously, took over. But I'm also, a Midwesterner. I grew up in Oklahoma City. I'm a veteran myself, but that doesn't also, mean that automatically, that his issues will resonate with me. But I do agree that he brings some diversity to the table, but he's not the only one, that's going to bring diversity to the table. There'll be over 20 plus candidates. And so I think that Democrats will make a fatal mistake if they just make someone the chosen one, whether that's him, Beto, or anyone else, before allowing voters a chance to decide.
I tend to agree with that. Okay. And thanks to the folks on the Bernie camp, because of the Unity Commission, and eliminating things like superdelegates, it's anybody's game in 2020.
Absolutely. All right, well, we've got a little ways to go, so we'll continue to follow that. Joe Biden, we're wondering if he's going to get in, especially after all these accusations. 2 more women have come forward of unwanted touching, and Lucy Flores is one of those. And I understand, Teslin, you know her. Tell us about her.
Absolutely. This is the first time that I've said this on national TV, and, I think it's very important. Vice President Joe Biden, if you are listening, you should know that Lucy Flores is a fraud. I myself worked with her at Our Revolution when she was on the board, and I currently have an EEOC claim filed against naming her, filed against Our Revolution, naming Lucy Flores as someone who was racist, who also implemented retaliation. She told me that if I didn't do what she told me to do, that I would suffer the consequences. So I think it's really important that Joe Biden knows that, I don't question what happened between her and him that day. I wasn't there, but I was there when I worked with Lucy Flores and had an opportunity to see her in action. And I'm the only one, this is very important, the only one that has legal documentation on her retaliation. She has a long list, a long history of her picking the perfect timing, quote and unquote, on speaking on these issues. The difference between Lucy and I is I spoke up immediately and took illegal action, and she waited for 5 years. And I'm happy to have that conversation in long form. And this is the first time that I've said it over the last year. I've been very quiet about it. But now that she's been compelled to speak up, I too am compelled to speak up to say that Lucy Flores is a fraud.
Wow, something we haven't heard before. Capri, what about the other women?
Look, at this point, what I'm seeing is nothing that rises to the level of disqualification, as Speaker Pelosi said, and just hearing what my colleague just said about, Flores. I'm really incredibly taken aback by this. I think that Democrats need to not sabotage themselves. We need to come together regardless of who the nominee is, and we certainly shouldn't be disqualifying folks before they get into the race just because we want to eliminate them. And frankly, Republicans are very afraid of Joe Biden as well. We need to let the system play out. Certainly, if there are more, salacious allegations, Joe Biden, like anyone else, needs to be held to account. But right now, we shouldn't be undermining, someone who could beat President Trump just because there is a select few, maybe on the progressive side that don't want to see him win.
Yeah, it's a different time now compared to 2016. So much has happened. We'll continue to follow that and see if it becomes an issue for him. Teslin, Capri, thank you so much for being with us. Good to see you both. Thank you. It's been nearly 50 years since we landed on the moon, and a new book looks at how JFK puts his legacy on the line to make that happen. The author joins us next.
Fly me to the moon.
Shot in the morning, and a patriotic moment caught on the playgrounds. Young kids stopping their tracks to honor the national anthem.
The kids putting their hands over their hearts, as you can see, when they heard the anthem playing at a softball game near their Indiana school. No one actually told them to do this.
But somebody took a picture, and now it is going viral. It's our shot of the morning on this Wednesday morning. All right, Brian, down to you.
All right, it's one of the most famous lines from a presidential speech ever.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Yep, as we approach the 50th anniversary of the moon landing later this year, a new book takes a deeper look at JFK's moon mission and those early days of space politics. Doug Brinkley is the author of this brand new book. It is excellent, called American Moonshot, John F. Kennedy and the Great Space Race, and he joins us right now. Doug, I did not know. I thought Kennedy said to himself, what's a hot issue? I think I'll do this space thing. But he's almost linked from his early days, from Buck Rogers to the moment in the 1960s.
That's right. And he was born in 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts, and aviation was the big deal. He was a child that benefited from the Wright brothers of 1903, or Charles Lindbergh, 1927. But mainly during World War II, his brother was a naval aviator. He died trying to take out rocket facilities in Germany, V1, 2, 3 parts and facilities. And Kennedy gets very committed to beating the Soviet Union after World War II. Sputnik's the key moment. The Soviets put up their first satellite, and John F. Kennedy builds his political career around saying we have a space gap with Russia and we're losing the missile race with Russia.
And for the idea, and the fact is, it is a fact, he criticized Eisenhower because Eisenhower did not want any part of any space race. And here's this young 40-something senator who says, we got to get this going, and we got to get going quick or we're doomed.
You know, Ike created NASA in 1958, but Eisenhower wanted to do an incremental approach to space exploration. Jack Kennedy's favorite word was leapfrog. Let's do something big. Let's go really far. That leapfrog was going to the moon. When Kennedy was giving these speeches about why we choose to go to the moon, the technology wasn't there to land Neil Armstrong. Kennedy was basically saying invent it. And the reason was because in World War II, FDR built the Grand Coulee Dam and the Tennessee Valley Authority. Eisenhower had created the interstate highway systems, the St. Lawrence Seaway. Kennedy was saying, what's the big thing my new frontier agenda should be? And he decided that manned space and the going to the moon by the end of the decade was the ticket.
Satellite technology, too. We need satellites. We need our Sirius radio and everything like that. But he was doing that. So what he did is, so Goddard started it, and then we get some German scientists. And when the Nazi Germany fell, we grabbed a lot of these guys. And the Soviets grabbed a lot of these guys. And it was off to the races. How did we get ahead after Sputnik?
Well, we grabbed Werner von Braun with Operation Paperclip. He was Hitler's genius rocketeer. Von Braun had created the V2 missile. And V2s were starting to rain on London. Lucky the war ended because they were getting perfected. But we brought these Nazi rocketeers to Fort Bliss near El Paso. Then by 1950, Huntsville, Alabama, and they start building and perfecting rockets. The moon rocket, the Saturn V, was built by Werner von Braun, the great engineer out of Huntsville, Alabama.
Amazing. So what did it mean for us? Because one thing was, they knew marketing back then. They were selling us in magazines and getting us excited, and 4% of our GDP was going to NASA.
You know, Brian, that's the key point. NASA was a very effective advertising agency. You never see a government agency promote itself the way NASA did. James Webb from North Carolina, he got into the oil business in Oklahoma. Webb runs NASA. It's unbelievable how he can get the astronauts in Life magazine or on National Geographic spreads. CBS News with Walter Cronkite was regularly covering these launches. And what Jack Kennedy recognized once on May 5th, 1961, when Alan Shepard goes into space, TV rating bonanza. Then Grissom goes up, TV ratings, and John Glenn, Wally Schirra, Scott Carpenter. So the whole country kind of got space crazed, and they said we can make the moon. It became bipartisan. There were times funding almost dried up, but it never did. At last, this summer, on July 20th, will be the 50th anniversary we landed on the moon.
And it's so important to go back and see how we got there, the momentum behind it, and how we won. Kennedy wasn't able to see it through, obviously. LBJ had picked it up, and then Nixon finished it off. American Moonshot is now out. Congratulations.
Hey, man,
another masterpiece.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
Best of luck. Meanwhile, Jillian, would you please, as a favor to me, tell me what else is happening in the news while I was talking?
Just because you asked so nicely, of course I will, Brian. Good morning to you at home as well. Let's talk about this story, a sad one we've been following. Funeral services are being held today for the South Carolina college student stabbed to death after getting into a car she thought was her Uber. Samantha Josephson's dad speaking out at a vigil in their hometown.
He was a monster, right? What he did was I don't want anybody else to go through it as a parent. This is nothing that you would ever want to do. You don't want to go through this.
A bill has been introduced in South Carolina that would require rideshare drivers to have an illuminated sign on their car. A convicted MS-13 killer who was kicked out of the country is arrested again. Prosecutors say William Chavez was deported 2 years ago after serving time for a deadly stabbing. But the Salvadorian killer snuck back into the country. ICE officials arrested him on Long Island. Chavez, now charged with illegal re-entry into the U.S., faces up to 20 years in prison. A task force could soon decide whether names of public places are offensive. A city councilor proposing the idea in Washington, D.C. Kenyon McDuffie wants a team of officials to identify schools, parks, and streets with controversial names, then pick new ones to replace them. The Democrat says the proposal came about after his daughter asked why some monuments are named after slave owners. A man is shocked when he shows up for his flight. And look at that, he's the only passenger there. The traveler taking a selfie with a completely empty commercial jet. He was the only person who bought a ticket on the flight from Lufthansa to Italy, from Lithuania to Italy, excuse me. The plane can hold up to 188 passengers, so he had a lot of seats to choose from. I'm surprised he even let him board the plane, right? Like, why don't they just cancel the flight? It's weird. Okay, anyway.
Don't more people want to go to Italy? I do.
Lithuania. All right, Jillian, thank you very much.
Yep.
19 minutes before the top of the hour, Janice Dean is out on the streets, and folks are up already.
Yes, look at this wonderful crowd today. Hi, you guys. Thank you for coming. Oh, what's your name? What's your name? Where are you from?
Matthew Zybert.
And can you give me a forecast today?
40 degrees and mostly sunny.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You're the best. Let's take a look at the maps real quick. It is going to be a mostly sunny day here in New York City. 42 right now. We're going to get into the 60s, though. We love it. We do have this coastal storm that actually brought snow to parts of the Carolinas yesterday. That's going to bring the potential for a little bit of rain, some wind and snow for parts of coastal New England. Then we're going to watch this system move across the Mississippi River Valley today and tomorrow. Severe threat, okay? Large hail, damaging winds, isolated tornadoes as we head into Thursday. Wave, my friends, to Steve Ainsley and Brian. I mean, this is a pretty good crowd for 6:40 in the morning.
Yeah, very nice. Hey, Janice, I think America's figuring out how to get on television. Show up for your weather report holding your book. Is that the key?
Where's that book? Yes, it is.
That's the key.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Very good.
High five.
All right.
Thanks, Janice.
Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson is one of our founding fathers, of course. Well, now some students at one college here in New York want to get rid of his statue on campus because they say it is racist.
But one outraged student is fighting back, and he joins us next.
Good morning. Welcome back. Some quick headlines now. Food edition. Peanut butter. How about it? It can teach you a lot about yourself. A new study says people who prefer smooth peanut butter are more introverted and crunchy peanut butter lovers are more extroverted. 49% of peanut butter eaters prefer smooth, according to a OnePoll survey. Well, I like them both. I'm split down the middle. Ainsley's split down the middle, too. Yeah, you go through phases. I hear you. All right, and just in time for Easter, Jelly Belly is pouring out a new flavor. Beer. And yes, the non-alcoholic treats come in a beer can. And social media is roasting a minor league baseball team's new ballpark burger topped with cheese and cotton candy. One person tweeting, "Yo, I'm calling the cops." The Albuquerque Isotopes debut the cotton candy tumbleweed burger tomorrow. Yuck. I don't know. Looks good, I guess. Steve?
Yeah, I guess. All right, we'll have to try one. Thanks, Jillian. Founding Fathers under attack. For the second year in a row, students at Hofstra University here in New York State are demanding the school remove a Thomas Jefferson statue on their campus, claiming the founding father institutionalized racism. Our next guest is a student at the school who launched a counter petition in response. He says the statue should stay. Join us right now, Hofstra University student and campusreform.org correspondent, newly minted, Richard Caldwell joins us live. Good morning to you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so I remember there were protests a year ago regarding this, and then the school decided, you know what, he's going to stay.
Right, exactly. Yeah, last March, around the exact same time, there was a big issue about this, and we made the counter petition. I made the counter protest, and we had meetings with the administrators. And after 3 months of debate, they decided that the statue was going to stay up. And so now all of a sudden, it seems to be an issue again. But I believe this issue has already been solved, seeing as how they already decided they wanted to keep it up. So.
Right, and you say that it's better to keep him up because you say it's better to acknowledge that what happened in history than to pretend that it never did.
Right. So I'm a history major, so I love history, and I study it very closely. And Thomas Jefferson was a great man. He wrote the Declaration of Independence. He instilled many of the ideals of freedom and equality that we use in our society today. And we also have to acknowledge that he had the past history of slavery, which we look back and say it was horrible today, but at the time was normal.
You say acknowledge that.
Right.
Just put that out there.
Acknowledge that, right. But part of studying history is looking at the whole picture, not just part of this. And if you remove the statue, you remove the conversation about it, you remove the history about it, and the only way that we can move forward from the past is talking about history and acknowledging things happened, while also looking at the greater picture and seeing all good that he did.
Okay, so don't pretend it never happened, just tell the whole story.
Right.
Okay. Hofstra University did put out a statement. They say after conversations a year ago with a variety of stakeholders about the Jefferson statue on campus, Hofstra University's president announced in May 2018 that the statue will remain where it is. That's exactly what you wanted, isn't it?
Right, exactly. I think it's a great place for people to see it and think about Thomas Jefferson and the freedoms that he instilled for our society, and to have that conversation started right there.
All right. Well, Richard Caldwell, we thank you very much for joining us live.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Meanwhile, 11 minutes before the top of the hour, 2 million people saw him get married on television. Now, Little People Big World stars Jeremy and Audrey Roloff are sharing their secrets to dating and love. Good morning. They're going to join us next. 2 million people watched as Jeremy and Audrey Roloff shared their vows and committed their lives to each other on TLC's Little People, Big World.
And now the couple sharing details of their beautiful love story for the first time in their new book, A Love Letter Life.
Here with more on their book, Jeremy and Audrey. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
So what is A Love Letter Life, Jeremy?
Yeah, so A Love Letter Life, we like to compare it to, we think everyone's love story should be intentional, should take time. Love stories in nature, relationships in nature aren't very convenient. There's no backspace key. There's just accepting and moving forward. In quite honest resemblance of a love letter. So we feel like A Love Letter Life is just the pursuit of that journey, that intention.
A better story.
A better story, exactly.
Audrey, y'all been married for almost 5 years. You have an 18-month-old little girl at home. We've seen your family highlighted on the show, Little People, Big World. And we're just cheering for you guys. And I'm so happy that you wrote this book. For people out there that are struggling, what's your advice? How do you get through it?
The main thing, I think we just really want to inspire people to pursue creatively, date intentionally, and love faithfully, which is the subtitle of the book. So we share a lot of stories in this book about things that we've struggled with. It's kind of like our story with all its imperfections and flaws. And we just like to tell people, we're on the journey. We're young, obviously, still in the early phases, and we're learning. But we feel like there just wasn't a lot out there for people, there wasn't a lot out there by people like us that are kind of in it with them for our generation.
Well, let's talk about some of the things from the book. For instance, not an island. What does that mean?
Yeah, not an island. So we believe in integrating instead of isolating. Like people our age nowadays, specifically with social media, they get into these relationships, and next thing you know, it's like they're on this island, right? But having people, friends and family speaking into your relationship is a massive sign of health and growth and mentorship, and there's just so much there.
And we allow that in our marriage today, but also in our dating relationship, friends and family, to either raise green flags or red flags for our relationship as kind of like an affirmation of
people say there's no such thing as shortcuts in life, but I would disagree. There are, and it's told to you by people who have been there and done that.
I've heard of people raising red flags. I've never heard of raising a green flag. How often did you get a green flag?
Yeah, all the time.
All around, and that was one of the things that really encouraged us in our dating relationship.
People would come up to us, and we tell all these stories in the book, but
like strangers
they would put their hands on us. Strangers would pay for our meals and affirm us and be like, hey, thank you for what you're doing. We're like, what are we doing, But
was that because you were on TV?
I wouldn't assume so. At least they didn't lead on to it, right? But
the show is great, and we saw you get married, but we really hadn't heard your story. So it's great to be able to read the book and learn about sharing and not being on an island, to integrating part of your family. And I agree with that. I think when you try to live this life by yourself and just the two of you, and and isolating your family, it's not going to be successful.
Definitely, yeah. And one thing we try to get across in the book, or I guess the inspiration as well for the book, is everything in life that's successful seems to have a mission statement, goals, and a team effort. And so, like, why don't our marriages? Like, everything successful has an agenda, a strategy, a system in which it works, or call it a board of directors, if you will, not an island. Right. It's like, why aren't we doing that with our marriages? Marriages can be so powerful and so awesome for not just, the two people in it, but also society by and large. And it's like, why aren't we being more intentional?
And the world and evil will try to break up families.
Yeah.
So I think it's wonderful that you're writing a book of how we can make our lives and our families and our relationships better.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
that's the plan. So,
God bless you.
The book is out now. It's called A Love Letter Life. Jeremy and Audrey Roloff.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate
Thank you so
it.
much.
Good luck.
Thank you.